Welcome back, Victory Cluckers. I mean Victory Stitchers. Sorry, I'm getting a bit clucky today. We're going to be learning how to make a couple of cute chickens. We're going to start with 2 squares of fabric. They're each 5 inches square. And I've just used a cotton fabric here, nice and easy, and a smaller square that's 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches of contrasting fabric. This is going to make the comb at the top of the chicken's head. And the third piece, I'm using a piece of felt, simply because it doesn't fray, and that's about 1.25 inches square approximately. Now with that one, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut it in half diagonally, and this is going to make the beak. So just corner to corner, don't need that one now. We're going to take this triangle and fold it in half, and the folded side is going to point towards the ground. Now we'll take our first piece of fabric, I'll just move the sewing machine back a little, take our first piece of fabric, and this is going to be the beak of the bird, which is going to be sticking out, but because we're looking at the right side of the fabric, we need to put everything facing inwards, and that will become clear as to why we do that very shortly. So that's going to go about 1 inch down, flush with the edge there. The folded edge is at the top. The shorter double edge is going to be flush with the left hand side of the fabric, about 1 inch down. I'm just going to pin that into place to make it secure. And I'm just going to put that aside while we work on the comb. Now, we've got a 2.5 inch square piece of fabric, which we're going to fold in half, right sides together. And I'm going to do a very small, just seam allowance, maybe just 1/4 inch, along each short side, and then turn it round the right way. Don't forget to back stitch, secure those stitches in place so they don't unravel later. That's one side done. Flip it round for the other. Trim those threads. Now before I flip it round the right way, I'm just going to clip in the corners up by the folded edge. This is just going to help reduce any bulk when we turn it round the right way. Just get rid of those little wee bits. And turning it round, just like a little envelope. It doesn't look like much at the moment. Now I'm going to do a small basting line on the raw edges. Now they meet up flush with each other, and I'm going to run it not quite 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to go slightly inside that, and I'm going to go with the longest stitch length, which on my machine is 5mm, and I am not going to back stitch. Sorry, I'm going to back stitch at one end, but I'm not going to back stitch at the other, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So lovely great big stitches, run off the other end, pull it out and leave a bit of a tail. I'll just clip the other end away though. Now, put those great big stitches. The bobbin thread, that's the thread that's underneath. We're going to take that thread tail, just try and untangle these from each other, and we're going to give it a gentle pull. I'm not sure why this system only works with the bobbin thread and not with the top one, but that's just kind of the rule. So we're just going to take that and hold the material, hold the piece in my right hand and pull with my left, and pulling it there, and I've actually gathered it. You can do this by hand if you want, gathering by hand, and I've got a little video that I put up a couple of weeks ago on how to do a gathering if you're going to make an apron or anything, and it's nice and easy to do it by hand. But I find if you're going to use a small, do it for a small piece, it's just as easy to do it on the machine. When you get a larger piece, it gets a little tighter. But we've got a nice little gathered edge there, which we are now going to apply back to our first piece, our first square, the one that's got the beak attached. This is the comb, and it's going to be sitting at the top of the chicken's head. Now, everything's inverted when we're attaching onto here, so we need to flip it round so that the raw edges match the raw edges on our original fabric. It's a bit hard because it kind of wants to curve around, but the best you can, and it's going to be sitting just over 1/4 inch away from the left edge. That means we're going to be, when we do our 1/4 inch seam, we will have enough space to sew the two pieces of fabric, the two squares together, without actually catching the comb in there. And I'm just going to pin it in to hold it in place. And the last thing we can make is the little wattle that goes under the chin. And I'm just going to use the scrap that I had left over when I did the beak, and it's just going to be a random kind of, almost like a part pear shape. That's just going to go under the beak, again the edge against the edge of the left hand side of that square. So now everything's laid in place. We can get our second square and place it on top. And we're going to stitch 3 sides of the square, not all 4, just 3, starting at the bottom left, going up to the corner, along the top, and then down on the right hand side. Now I am going to reattach these pins so that I have all 3 layers pinned together. And I can see my little comb is trying to poke out there, so I think I'm just going to bring that down and put a second pin in just to hold that in place and make it behave itself, like so. See, the beak is staying put nicely, so I'll just reattach that pin with the other square over the top, and the same with that little wattle. Right, so I've got kind of a sandwich. Inside my sandwich I've got all my chicken bits, beak, wattle and comb. So remember, I'm starting down here, 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew it on 3 sides, leave the 4th side open. Right, I'm just going to place my little fabric here under the needle, and let's not forget to turn our stitch length back to normal, which is 2.5 millimeters. There we go. And I'm just going to secure it with a back stitch at this end. And when I get to the bulky bits, I'm just going to go a little bit more gently. It's going over the beak, it's a little thicker because it's about 2 layers of felt and 2 layers of fabric. And we're going to pivot it around because we're on a corner. Let's trim those ends. Quarters of a square sewn. Now I'm going to clip the corners up here, again just to reduce a bit of bulk. And now we can turn our chicken around the right way. It's going to start looking like a chicken. It's not going to be completely recognisable yet. I'm just going to use something pointy, probably the end of my awl with its stopper on, just to get that corner out. And you can start seeing something that resembles a chicken. There's our gathered little comb. And I am now going to stuff the little body with some fibre fill. You can actually stuff it with wheat or rice if you want something with a bit more density. Just have to be careful though, because you don't want grain running all over your sewing area. But before I stuff him, I'm just going to fold over about 1/4 of an inch, because this will be our seam allowance for when we sew up the bottom, sew up that gap. So I'm just going to finger press it into place. That should hold it well enough. I don't need the steam iron for this. Such a small object. Just going to use my fingernails. You can see that's given enough of a crease that I can pick up from later. Right, time to stuff him. Just about finished. Just to make sure you get stuffing into the corners, use smaller bits and use something pointy like a pencil just to kind of work it into the corners there, and that will help fill those corners up a little bit. One last bit in there, and you can push it down a little bit extra just to give yourself a bit more wiggle room. I'm going to now stitch it together, but it's not stitched together like a pillow. It's actually going to be side seam to side seam. So we've got we're going to end up with a triangular chook. So I'm going to match those side seams together, and I'm going to just attach those with a pin. And then, because we've already finger pressed those edges, they should just sit together rather nicely. And I'm going to finish this little fellow on the machine. You can actually stitch it by hand if you want something a little less visible. And you can even do a decorative stitch on the machine if you wanted something really different. But I'm just going to go with a straight ordinary stitch. It's not going to be very, very visible because it's going to be right down the bottom anyway. You're going to have to be doing a bit of squishing just to kind of get everything under the foot because of the stuffing. So you don't want to overstuff him. So I'm going to just place him under. Now I presume the camera can see past all this chicken body. And I'm going to stitch quite close to that folded edge, quite close to the edge, maybe 1/8 of an inch or even less, because I want to catch all layers of fabric. And I'm going to start with a back stitch to secure in place. Go nice and slowly. And it's done. Snip those ends off nice and close. I'm using a matching thread, so it's not really that visible, the little seam down the bottom. Just massage all that fibre fill back into kind of place, just so he sits quite, or she, I don't know, is this a boy or a girl? Probably a girl actually, because there's no big plumy tail, so There we go, one little chicken. She just needs some eyes now, so those are going to be stitched on by hand. Now the best way to do this is to grab a pin, just pinch it into place so that you know everything's pinched where the seams are, and where you think the eye looks good, pop a pin through, and you know you're going to get the matching one on the other side. Mark it with a pen or a pencil or a piece of chalk, nothing too big and bold because you want to cover it up with thread. And then thread your needle. Now you'll need a reasonably long hand sewing needle, because we are going to start by going in underneath the chicken and coming out through the eye. So the longer the needle, the better. So I'm just going to thread this one up, thread it double, but I am not going to fasten with a knot at the other end, simply because I don't want this knot stuck on the outside of the chicken. Right, we're just going to take the needle, go in underneath the chicken through that fibre fill and up through one of those eye dots. There we go. I'm just going to pull that through very carefully. I want to lose the ends of the thread inside the chicken, but I don't want to pull so much that I take them out this end. So I'm going to catch just a few strands. I'll make sure I don't catch the other side, just this piece, just a few strands. So it's a very skinny little stitch, and I'm just going to pull that through. And I'm going to do that again. And that's quite secure now, so no pulling is going to take that loose, or that opening thread, leader thread through. Now, I'll just get those couple of strands again, like so. Take the thread, wind it around about 2 times, nice and snug with the needle, and pull that through. You get a beady little eye. It's basically what we call a French knot. And now I'm going to put it through itself, and we're going to come out the other side and do the same thing again to match the other side, to match the first side. So come through a couple of strands a couple of times. And then wrap it around twice, pull it through, and we've got our second eye. Now we're just going to put it back in there, stitch it back into itself, and then down towards the underbelly of the chicken to lose that end again. So here we have our outer thread. I'm going to cut that right flush to the chicken, and it's popped back and lost itself inside. So there we go. Here's our chicken. And no raw edges, all done. I'm going to show you another one that I've made in exactly the same way. The only variance is the comb is actually made out of felt as well, but you can add all sorts of different things. You can add little bits of fabric for a tail. If you want to make a little rooster, you can add little wings on there. The sky's the limit. So here's one I made a little earlier, and the difference really with the first one is just the comb. I've just cut the comb out of a piece of felt, the same felt as I used for the beak and for the wattle. So you can see it just gives a slightly different look. But you know, variety is the spice of life. And just to add to that variety, I am going to place her eyes, instead of stitching them on like we did with the spotted chicken, I'm actually going to use some cute little buttons, and I've got 2 matching buttons here. So just remember, if you're going to give this to a small child, don't give them one with a button because they could come off. So just as before, we will start off underneath the chicken to hide that loose end, and we're going to come up through, there we go, through the dot for the eye, pulling the thread through till it just disappears. There we go. I'm just going to secure that through there, just a few strands, just so we don't accidentally pull the whole thing back again. Now, make sure I get the right side up. It's actually a textured button, it's got a smooth side and a patterned side, so I want the patterned side showing. Now this is just a 2-hole button, so this keeps it nice and easy. I'm just going to put my needle through, and the other thing, if you're going to use a long needle, quite often they're thicker, so do make sure that your needle can fit through your buttonholes, otherwise you're going to have to go for a different button or a different needle. So I've got a button there, and I'm going to go through, right through to the other side of the chicken, the dot I've made on the other side. And then I'm going to attach the other one. Same way as before, slip it onto the thread, line it up, and come back through the second hole and into the first hole of the first button. So the 2 buttons are actually linked together with the thread. So there we go. Now I'm not going to make them too tight, but I'm definitely going to make them so that they're not hanging really, really loose. Make sure I've got no loose threads. I can see a loose thread there that I need to, that's it, secure. So I'm just going to go through again, through the second hole of the first button into the first hole of the second button. Try and go through the holes that you have already made earlier. Back again, maybe 3 or 4 times, and that'll keep it pretty secure. One more time through. And back again. Right, so we've pulled that through. We've gone through 3 or 4 times through each button. Now to finish her off, I'm just going to go down to this, through this button, but not through the whole thing, and we're just going to come out on the same side like this. So we've got the needle and thread under that button, but still on the same side. Then all we need to do is take our thread, I usually hold on just one end like that, wrap it about 3 times around the button, and the 3rd time leave a loop, put the needle through the loop, and pull. Do that one more time, that just gives you a little knot underneath there. So round there, through, pull it tight, and we can just snip that nice and close so that the tail is under the button and is not seen, like so. And there we have chicken number 2 with slightly different eyes, different bit of character. So take your pick as to which one you like better. So with Easter coming up very soon, you might want to make a few little chickens to place around your living room or wherever, just for little decorations. Here's another one I made a wee while ago, this is probably last year sometime, as just a little decoration. This one's a bit bigger, so I started off with a slightly larger pair of squares to start with, but you can do these any size. You can do ginormous ones and fill them with heavier like sand or rice or anything and make doorstops out of them. This one here differs because it's got wings, so they're just appliqued on, well, zigzag stitched on to the body before stitching the two squares together. The only thing is what I wouldn't do again if I made another one of these would be to not use flannelette. I had some lovely flannelette left over and it looked great to start with, but because it's a very open weave it starts to come undone, and I haven't used any fusible interfacing or anything to adhere these before I stitch them. They're just stitched on with a zigzag. So next time if I was to do this again, I would either stick them on with an double-sided adhesive and then stitch them, or I would actually probably bypass flannelette altogether and use a more closely woven cotton like the main body of the chicken is. But there you go, a few ideas for Easter or just for decorations, and if you like chickens, why not? Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the like button if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, and subscribe so you can get more videos each week on sewing techniques, tips and tutorials. And I'd love it if you left your comments and questions below. Thanks for watching and see you next time. I'm still not sure if these are boys or girls. Girls.